War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things. All those things. All those things. All those things.
Hello. Emily Gorcenski may be most well known for her writings on far-right extremism or her digital activism, but that's not the only reason she's today's guest on Global Warning. Emily didn't just attend the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. The Nazis chanted blood and soil, marching through her hometown with tiki torches, and she was assaulted repeatedly. Worse, this was only the beginning of what would amount to years of on- and offline harassment and endangerment at the hands of far-right actors. If you know me, then you know Unite the Right was a rallying cry. I came out of musical retirement to record the song Heather Heyer and later interviewed Heather's mom, Susan Bro, on my first podcast, The Awkward Interviews. Heather, as many know, was murdered by a Nazi who ran her down with his pickup truck in one of the first documented instances of a now spreading trend. As for Emily, she's one of my heroes for what she's endured and how she's bravely persevered. Like me, Emily believes strongly in building an equitable internet that fosters collaboration, community, and autonomy. She wants the same for the physical world. Today on Global Warning Episode 4, I speak with Emily Gorcenski about what it's really like to face the ire of the far right, her background in data science and its role in her daily work, her take on the national landscape, and finally, her visions for a more humane internet and world. Emily, welcome to the show. Everybody, please be sure to like, subscribe, follow Emily on Blue Sky, and be sure to superfan, member, etc., because that's how you get the exclusive extras. Emily, I know everyone wants to hear about your experience being doxxed and swatted, but we'll close with that. First, tell me how you got into data science and how you leverage that for your work today, exposing far-right extremism.
Sure thing, and thanks for having me here. I guess to start, I got into data science because I was a mathematician. I always liked working with numbers. I liked working with data. And what I think compelled me about data is that you're always trying to find the deeper truth, right? The universe is constantly lying to us. It makes us want to believe easy things when more complicated things are sitting under the surface. And I think as a data scientist, what you do, or what you need to do to be good at data science, is to learn how to ask the question behind the question, and to really dig for deeper truths, whether that is in looking at signal processing, whether that is looking at text analysis, or whether that's trying to understand networks of extremists or terror movements.
Yeah, that makes good sense. So how, if at all, does this impact your perspective on the current state of the country? Obviously, as a data scientist, and to your point a minute ago, you are looking underneath what is out there for everyone to see. So as someone who may know more than, the average mainstream media viewer, where do you see us headed?
I think, one thing about where we are right now as a society is we're always looking for easy answers, right? I think we have this very hyped up, accelerated media ecosystem. We have this sort of full contact participatory political system now where it's not just enough to, be part of a party. You have to be online. You have to be, competing in social media. I don't even want to say participating because it really is all about competing. And what that does is that drives people to try to find easy answers. They're really happy to stop at a headline if it tells them what they want to believe is true, whether that is on their side or against their side, right? And very few people stop to look through and look at the deeper questions. What is the actual reality? To try to find the nuance and to try to find, what are the actual factors driving these politics, these economic decisions, these social situations. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that one of the benefits I've had for being a data scientist for my entire career is that you really do have to stop and say, like, hey, is this data too good to be true? Because if it feels like it's tailor-made for what I want to believe, it's probably too good to be true, right? So you have to look deeper. And I think that if we had that skill set, today, more broadly, we might be in a better spot.
Right. If we all had that skill set. That would definitely be helpful, because it's not unknown that not only do people make decisions or, come to conclusions based on headlines, but they're also posting it based off of that. And as you said, it's competing. Everyone's competing for attention, whereas behind the scenes there's collaboration. And interestingly, one of the fascist platforms, Instagram, incorporated this collaboration option. So in a weird way, we are collaborating now on at least one of these apps, where we are communicating behind the scenes, at the very least, to determine what to share publicly at the same time. Although obviously there's a lot more on than just on social media. So you pointed at the media and our, lack of education on how to dissect it. That's clearly a major issue, has been forever, and to me, it seems like it's getting worse. I've never seen it look more like state propaganda than it looks now. So, if at all, how has your outlook changed since Trump's reelection and the beginning of the incorporation of Project 2025?
Yeah, my outlook hasn't really changed too much at all, right? Because I think one of the things about being from Charlottesville is that we already saw this 7 years ago, right? So, for a lot of people, it's starting to hit their communities for the first time, or it's starting to actually feel real. And we saw this, you know, for the last almost decade, right? 8 years now since the attack. And we've been through this whole, we've been slandered as extremists and terrorists. We sat through this whole national discourse of like, did Trump really say that there were very fine people on both sides, and nitpicking his words and all of this stuff. This whole sort of retconning of what actually happened, like, oh, they weren't actually chanting Jews will not replace us, as if I didn't see it with my own eyes and hear it with my own ears, right? And so we kind of have been through all that. So nothing has really changed for me, with Project 2025, with Trump, any of this stuff. I think that
Interesting.
if one thing that we need to understand is that this is how it works, right? And you shouldn't be blindsided by something like Project 2025, right? Because people who have been doing activist work in this space have known for years, have named the Heritage Foundation for years, saying they have an agenda. This is how they're going to do it. They're walking through a playbook, right? And so none of that should have come as a surprise. So for me, it's really all about, how come we didn't predict that sooner, right? How come we didn't seal off against that as a society sooner? And so nothing
Right.
has really changed for Trump too, because I've already moved on to the next thing, right? I'm not
Yeah.
concerning myself with what he's doing, with what the GOP is doing. I'm looking at how do you solve this problem more systematically.
Okay. So that's a great lead in then. So I like that. What is the next thing then? Can you go into further detail?
Yeah, I think that we're definitely seeing changes in politics globally. We're seeing the role of the state shifting from being a service-based state to being a authoritarian-based state, right? Where it's moving into policing as a primary form of state influence in the day-to-day life. We're seeing that with Doge, all of the erosion of public services and things like that. But this isn't just happening in the US, this is happening globally. We're seeing this in Germany, right? Where I just moved back from Germany, where we're starting to see things like at the municipal level, when the CDU, the conservative political party, took power in Berlin, they started shutting down parks, and they started canceling bike lane projects and things like that. And they're moving more things into policing. They're moving more funding into, supporting arms development. And so we're seeing this
Incredible.
sort of this walking back of that sort of
Down
service-based
to
state.
parks, down to
Yeah,
bike
yeah,
lanes.
down to
I mean,
the
that's
level of parks and
incredible.
bike lanes, right, right. And this has
Incredible.
happened
And
at
it,
the municipal level in the states for years, where you look at the average U.S. City's budget, look at what percentage of it goes to policing, right?
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. As an abolitionist, the awkward interviews was nearly entirely focused on that subject. And you mentioned at one point, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is when it comes to data, when it comes to media reporting. And oddly enough, that can be the case even in the opposite direction. Samuel Sinyangwe, who I had on Awkward Interviews, is also a data scientist, and he focuses on predominantly police crimes, police murders of people. And he's kind of the most often cited source of that information. And that's where, the statistic remains current at 3 people per day killed by cops in this country. Then a New York Times article came out citing this lengthy meta study where it was determined that potentially 100% of the police killings are not reported. In other words, the number could be 6+. So that's always what I talk about is I say 3 to 6+, because that's the best I can do with the data. I'm really glad on a side note, or, to the next point, that you brought up this global aspect. You're absolutely right. If people are paying attention beyond the United States, we are seeing this everywhere. So on the other side of, flip side of that, we are organizing across state borders. We're organizing internationally. So how does this struggle, the struggle against fascism, the struggle against, all government funding going to policing carceral nonsense and war, how do our struggles connect across the globe?
I think it's really important to understand perspectives, and to understand what people are going through in other countries. I think that my time living abroad has opened my eyes into, not just, how bad the systems can be, but also, how broad the spectrum is that where this can go, right? I talk sometimes about how I did refugee support at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, and I went over to the border and I saw these huge crowds of refugees looking to come in, cross into Poland, and I think it was something that helped anchor me, and give me perspective, because no matter how bad I felt like things were in Germany or in the United States or things like that, it's still not like as bad as somebody shooting a missile at your house. Of
Great
course, we can
point.
see what's going on in Gaza. We can see what's going on in Sudan. We can see what's going on in other parts of the world, right? And I think that helps us have perspective. And as an American, we tend, like I tend to see American culture as being, exceptional to both the positive and negative. So we think that everything that bad happens to us is the worst thing that's happening in the world. I think if we can stop, if we can decenter ourselves, if we can start listening to what other people are doing in other countries and how they are, like how authoritarianism manifests for them, how they survive under authoritarianism, how they thrive under authoritarianism, even, I think we can learn useful skills that we can take to our everyday, right?
Yeah.
If you have somebody that's living in a country that has tight internet controls, right? They have different ways of getting information out, right? And we can learn from that, because there's always another thing that can come up for us here, right? And if we don't start developing those skills now, then we're going to be sorely missing them when the time comes that we should need them. So for me,
Yeah.
internationalism is a process of decentering and listening and learning.
I love that. That is gold. And you had said earlier that for a lot of people, this isn't anything new. As someone who was living in Charlottesville, who saw this nearly 10 years ago, nothing new. For Black, Indigenous, Brown people, trans people, this is nothing new. What's making this be such a big talking point now is that it's affecting, white cis Christian people, right? And likewise, I feel like we've long been doing the studies, of Frantz Fanon, Kwame Nkrumah, whatever. We just haven't been doing, I guess, a good enough job collectively, those of us who have been talking to people or reading these books, of getting that message out there. How do we learn? But we just have to keep doing what we're doing. And it's because of what we're doing that the far right doesn't like people like us. Even having these conversations goes against everything that they're preaching and fighting for. We're the people who counter protest their hate rallies, expose their crimes, fight for equality and justice. So to that end, that's why you and I have both been targets. I am thankful I've never been swatted. I doubt I would have handled it as well as you did. But I have been doxxed by the likes of Andy No. And so, I can relate to that part, and it's not fun. I'm now prepared, I'll say that. So let's close out with that. I hate closing on the negative. So maybe you can give us a lesson from this, something positive we can take away from it. But it is obviously such a big theme for all of us who are doing this work. And of course, it's like the clickbait for listeners. So tell us what happened after Charlottesville. How did you end up being doxxed and swatted? What was the physical and emotional toll? And again, like, did you learn something from this? Did you take something positive away? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, I think, of course, in the aftermath, as I was pressing charges against a Nazi in the aftermath of Unite the Right. And I was doing a lot of work to expose a lot of the people who came in and did a lot of violence to our community. And of course, that was going to make me a target. And people did dox me and they swatted me. And there's only so many things that you can do to prevent that, right? I'm a homeowner, right? I bought a house in 2012 with my wife, and I can't do much about those public records, and that's kind of out there, right? I could sell the house, I could move, but we don't want to do that. And so there's only so much that I could do to prevent that. I do think that we have a small community here in Charlottesville, and part of that means that you do have to look at the community holistically, right? And I don't love the police, but I can definitely talk to the police and be like, hey, so I just want you to know that I'm not like going to cause a mass shooting. I'm not going to go do a mass shooting. So if you do get one of these calls, it's probably a SWAT thing. Here's my number. Call me first. You can always do that. If I pick up, I'll pick up and tell you, this is not the case. And that's actually what happened. I wasn't home. Thankfully, my wife wasn't home. They called me. They said, hey, we got this call. Of course they did. Like, they called me after they sent out like the men with guns, but you can do things like that. And I do think that even as we work towards abolition, we also have to look at the community and the world that we live in today. And so I think that was part of it. I think what I took away from this experience, I did move to Germany to try to lower the heat a little bit, and largely for my safety and my mental health, and to, as I said, put myself in a different perspective. But one thing that I learned in the sort of, full aftermath of Unite the Right was I was surprised by I was surprised by the people I knew that suddenly didn't have my back. People I'd known for years who didn't even call to say like, hey, how are you doing? Are you all right? Do you need anything? And I was surprised by the people who did. And I think that if there's a positive that I've taken away from that, it was that it made me value certain relationships a lot more. It really sharpened what I need to look for in the people that I have around me, what they're trying to do, how we can help each other, how we can rely on each other. And, I've not always been perfect. They've not always been perfect, but it puts it in it makes community more of a concrete thing. Like, community is more of a verb at that point. And so I think that that's what I've taken away from it. And that's a lot of the reason why I moved back is, I want to be in my home. I want to be with my people, my community, and I want to be able to do the things to build the world that I want to see. And a lot of that is not, we're not going to react to every single thing that Trump does. We can't stop that. What we can do is we can help feed the hungry people in our community. We can help provide shelter and warmth to the houseless people in our community. And those are the things that I think we're doing, right? And whatever he wants to do about bathrooms and Project 2025 and all of that stuff, I can't do anything about it. I can get angry about it. I can call my senator for a lot of good that does, right? At the end of the day, like, I'm focusing on things that I can actually make an impact on. That's going to be local. That's going to be here with my people, with my community.
That's beautiful. I'm really thankful that you were able to return and feel part of your community again. And that is becoming a running theme, across experts, across industries, so to speak, or specialties. Everyone is kind of saying the same thing, and it's exciting to me because it's what I've been preaching for a very long time: mutual aid. Thank you so much, Emily. This was amazing. What a great guest for Global Warning. I've learned a ton, as has my audience, I'm sure. Be safe. Keep up the incredible work. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if you're listening, be sure to like, comment, and share, and then subscribe. And for exclusive benefits, become an official member. This episode was sponsored by Zevo Life Superfood, Good Feels Cannabis Seltzer, and Shimmerwood CBD-infused seltzers. Exclusive discounts using code WARNING, link in video description. Thank you again to Emily Gorcenski for an incredible episode, and we'll see you for Global Warning number 5.
War is immoral. Poverty is immoral. Racism is immoral. Police brutality is immoral. Oppression is immoral. Genocide is immoral. Imperialism is immoral. This country represents all those things. All those things. All those things.